Okay, I see the live button now.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Ian from the Steelers and that. With me is Josh and AJ, and we're here to talk WPIAL football tonight. Um, Hopefully, you guys can see everyone. This is our first time at this, so bear with us if we have any technical issues. You guys want to say hi, introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Josh Roundtree. I work for MSA Sports, MSASports.net. Cover WPIAL football pretty extensively, baseball in general pretty extensively. And,
And I'm AJ, and I run AJWPIAL on Twitter, and I'm a D7 contributor for WesternPAFootball.net. And I have my own blog, which is WPIALFootballZone.wordpress.com.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for participating in this hangout, guys. So hopefully, we're here for, well, I was thinking maybe an hour or so. So we won't take up too much of people's time tonight. And so I figured we could kick it off talking about Quad A, kind of who we like, who we think might surprise, and so maybe like who our conference champions are, who our eventual champions are, things like that. So what do you guys think?
well, I know like we ranked Woodland Hills first, Seneca Valley second, Central Capital third. To me, I think those three are the separation razor thin. All three are really. I don't know if either three is as good as, say, Central was last year. That team from Central last year was defensively one of the best I've ever seen. But there's three really solid teams there at the top, and there's some sleepers too. But I think you look at Woodland Hills, and they really, until the state finals, came the closest to beating Central last year. They played them pretty tough in that championship game. A couple of things didn't go their way. Weather got pretty bad too, but that Woodland Hills team is pretty good. And Miles Sanders, Art Thompson, running back, definitely I think the best 1-2 punch probably in the WPIAL in the backfield. So they're going to be set up for a really good run. And Novak, he always seems to get them there at least get them close to Heinz Field. And been surprised with that. But Quad A is really good, and I don't think that there's really one team you could say is hands down better than the rest.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Woodland Hills is pretty much the class of Quad A, at least at this point, heading into the season. I was, side note, technological note, I was looking at the YouTube broadcast of it, so I think I have to click on people when they're talking to get them to appear like large in the broadcast. So I'll try and do that so that it's not just my face there whenever other people are talking. So we're learning the technology as we go here. So yeah, but back to football, I do agree. Woodland Hills, although the Southeast has some good teams in it. Upper St. Clair's always solid. I mean, you can never bet against Jim Render. Penn Hills is going to be good this year. They've got a lot of talent on that team. I think Mount Lebanon will return to the playoffs, and Bethel Park's got some talented players returning too down there with their quarterback coming back. And Baldwin and Peters are always good too. So that's going to be a tough conference for Woodland Hills to get through. So AJ, you have any thoughts on there?
I really love Woodland Hills as a football team. That combo at running back that they have is going to be just so good. And then Central Catholic is going to be up there. They got several guys who are related to NFL guys. They've got Gunnar Farrat, who's a transfer, and they got Schaefer Swan, who's related to Lynn Swan, obviously. And my sleeper team to look out for, I think, in Quad A would be Pine Richland. They have a good quarterback and running back, and they got a good receiver from what I've heard.
Yeah, I think almost at this point, Pine Richmond, I think you almost, in a way, throw them up there with that top three that I mentioned earlier. I mean, if we were going to pick a dark horse, I agree. They're a good football team. Gucci is the heck of a quarterback. And you have a Division I quarterback already. When we talk about Central, I'm really curious to see what happens with Central and then having to replace all the guys they lost. I mean, they made a state championship game. JJ coached a team that was in Florida State now. Really didn't have to do anything for them. I mean, so rarely did he really make a play that impacted a game at all. I mean, really, it was just the ground attack and Mr. Brinza, who's gone. And, I think they really were relying on Riley Redmond, who, to be honest with you, I thought Redmond was just as good as Mr. Brinza last year. I thought he easily could have started probably for almost any team in WPIAL at running back. And to lose him with that ineligibility rule, that's going to be tough for them. Now they're going another guy, and Farad, I guess, is going to take over at quarterback. And I love the Adamitis kid too. I think they're going to try to work him into their offense a lot, Graham Adamitis. He made that big play in the championship game at Heinz Field last year. That punt ran it for a touchdown. They're going to be good because they're Central and they're always good. But I'm curious to see the guys that they lost maybe come back. You mentioned Schaefer Swan. That's a guy I think that really they're going to look to step up. There's been times I've seen them the last couple of years, particularly 2 years ago, not as good. He was tough to watch out there because he'd get hit right in the hands with passes and drop him. So, obviously working with his dad, I'm sure, and that coaching staff at Central is going to be better. But yeah, that's definitely a big question overall with Central Catholic. Just the guys they have to replace.
It's kind of funny we've gone through, all these teams that haven't really mentioned North Allegheny yet out of the Northern 8 Conference. I mean, you can't really ever count them out either. That Northern 8 Conference is loaded with, Seneca Valley is a fantastic team. I actually went out on a bit of a limb and picked them to make it to Heinz Field and lose to Woodland Hills in my Quad A prediction. But, with Seneca Valley, Central Catholic, North Allegheny, and Pine Richland, all playing each other, that's going to be a heck of a battle up there. And North Hills really isn't a bad team either. So that's going to be an interesting conference, but it's going to be another long year for, the teams at the bottom, Shaler and Butler. And, actually the conference I think that intrigues me the most kind of is the Foothills Conference, because you have Penn Trafford and McKeesport that are clearly the top two teams. And then after them, it's pretty much wide open with everybody else. I actually think Norwin could be a bit of a surprise this year. And, those last couple of playoff spots are really wide open between some teams that haven't made the playoffs in quite a while.
I agree about the Northern 8. I think it's stacked from top to bottom. North Allegheny plays Pine Richland week 2, and then they play Central Catholic in week 3. So those are two humongous weeks for that conference. And then McKeesport and Penn Trafford's a Saturday game at week 3. There's a crucial battle. That I think will decide the Foothills. But I've heard Altoona has a decent running back from what I've heard, and Pitt might be after him. I don't know if I heard that correct or not.
Yeah, you mentioned the Foothills too. I mean, now with Gateway gone, that conference is like kind of a shell of what it was, but at the same time, you have two really good teams there. I mean, Penn Trafford, they came out of nowhere last year. That playoff run they made, getting all the way to the semifinals. They have some talent. If you were to ask me who I thought maybe the most underrated coaches in the WPIAL, it would be John Ruane with Penn Trafford. The guy, everywhere he's been, whether it's Gateway as an assistant, and I know Terry Smith was there, and Terry did a great job. John Ruane did a lot of the coaching there as well. He was a big part of that coaching staff at Gateway. They were so successful, and obviously, he's still a teacher at Gateway, and now he goes to Penn Trafford. He's done nothing but good things really in a short time there. He really turned that program around. I mean, remember, Penn Trafford was a team every year that was trying to sneak in the playoffs or worse. they typically were getting gateway in week one or getting one of the powerhouses in week one of the playoffs because they were one of the last teams to get in. And now this is a Penn Trafford team that anybody could see them maybe sneaking into the semifinals again. And who knows, maybe going even farther because I don't think Quad A is as tough as it was a year ago. And now you have this Penn Trafford team that really has a lot of talent. They're good up front, good on defense, always hit you hard in the running game. They run the ball really well, and they can spread it out too. And they have talent all across the field.
Yeah, to Josh's point there, Penn Trafford actually lost 8 straight years in the first round of the playoffs from 2003 to 2010. Before their recent run, where 2 out of the last 3 years they've advanced out of the first round and then made it all the way to the semifinals last year. They're another team to watch. I mean, Quad A is loaded. I was in a debate a couple weeks ago with some people on Twitter about who are the top 5 teams in Quad A, and my point was basically there's 10 teams that you could put as a top 5 team in Quad A right now. You can say Penn Trafford and McKeesport out of the foothills. The 4 we named from the Northern 8, Seneca Valley, Central Catholic, North Allegheny, and Pine Ridgeland. And then out of the southeastern, you've got Woodland Hills, Upper St. Clair, and Penn Hills. I mean, that's 9 teams right there that are capable of probably at some point being ranked in the top 5 in Quad A this year. So I've already kind of mentioned what my prediction for Quad A is, that I've got Woodland Hills over Seneca Valley at Heinz Field. You guys want to throw anything out there?
I agree with you. To be perfectly honest, we ranked those 2 teams 1 and 2. I would not be surprised by that at all. And at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if you see a team like McKeesport sneak in there as well. I mean, that's a team I think that the last couple of years, particularly last year, I mean, coming back after kind of a disastrous season 2 years ago, they had so many off-the-field issues. And obviously, Coach Smith comes back in and just kind of, put a jolt into that program. And that would be a team that I would think has a chance of maybe making semifinals. But I agree with you, man. I think Woodland Hills and Seneca Valley, I think, are the 2 best teams. Central is one I could put in there, but if I'm going to pick, I'm going to start it. I'm going to be with you there. Woodland Hills and Seneca Valley playing at Heinz Field. And that'll be something because that, I believe, would be Seneca Valley's first trip to a WPIAL championship game. That's a program to take down. And now it's a huge school district now. They're benefiting by having such great numbers. And I'm with you. It's not Central back in there.
I agree with. I would probably say right now I would have Woodland Hills and Seneca Valley is a team they are loaded. It could be either them or I could see maybe even Central Catholic, but McKeesport could definitely be a sleeper. I mean, they got an emerging star. Khalid Hudson has already several offers. Cool. He has West Virginia, Pitt, and Cincinnati offers from already. He's going to be an emerging star for them.
One thing that worries me about Seneca Valley, and I saw them last year, I guess I saw them against North Hills, I think. And TJ Hall is a great quarterback for them, coach's son. But at times last year, I thought, and the last 2 years that I've seen him play, at times, that they've kind of focused their offense a bit too much around him. Last year, I know in particular, the second half against North Hills, it was a game that went to double overtime, I want to say. They ran every play through him. Every play in the second half and every play in overtime was either a design run for TJ Hall or a pass from TJ Hall. And he seemed a bit overwhelmed by having to do that much in their offense. He's a good quarterback. I wouldn't say that he's necessarily an elite WPIAL quarterback, but he runs their offense well. They have to find other ways to contribute. 2 years ago when they had good Forrest Barnes back there in the backfield, that was a really great offense. Took a step back last year. I think they're going to kind of reload again this year to get some guys in there. But that's one thing with Seneca Valley that would worry me. It's just maybe trying to have TJ Hall do too much.
Was that North Hills game the one that they tried that flea flicker at the end and it got batted down in the end zone?
Yeah, they did. It was they tried a Hail Mary. Well, there was that, and then there was in the overtime, I think, they got pushed back, I want to say, and then they threw a Hail Mary, and the kid caught it at the 1 yard line for a first down. And then they ended up putting it in on the next play to win. It was unbelievable. And it was great, too, because the North Hills student section, they all dressed up like dads. Like they wore like fanny packs and jean shorts and collared shirts, and it was kind of, I guess, a shot at TJ Hall being a kid. But that was one of the best student sections I saw all year. It was a heck of a game. That's when I kind of realized, like this North Hills team is kind of for real. They compete, and they did last year. I mean, they lost to North Hills by one. They held tough with some pretty good teams in that conference. So, but yeah, that was a heck of a game last year.
Yeah, I think that game was on Root Sports or was on some TV station. I remember watching it. Or no, actually, it was the game that WPXI live broadcast that game from just like a camera.
I did that for PXI. That's right.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny that we've got two light blue and black teams heading to Heinz Field here with Woodland Hills and Seneca Valley. But yeah, all those teams are loaded. Even Penn Trafford can make a run. And actually, Josh, while you were talking, I looked back through my giant spreadsheet that goes back to 1980, and Seneca Valley made a championship game when they played in AAA back in 1989. They lost to, let me see here, I didn't look up who they lost to. But I guess that was back at Three Rivers. Oh, they lost to Aliquippa. So two teams that are no longer in AAA played in the AAA championship game in '89 with the Quips beating Seneca Valley. So,
Ian, you are cutting out a little bit. I don't know if AJ is having problems with it. Me.
Say that again?
Yeah, you were cutting out a little bit. Technology. AJ, was he cutting out for you too?
Yeah, I can't really hear him that well. Yeah.
You saying mine's low?
No, yours is fine.
Now it sounds like you were just cutting out a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, we're still kind of figuring out this technology thing, so we'll get there. Moving on to AAA. Obviously, the Parkway Conference has dominated AAA for a long time. They've probably got the two best teams in AAA this year with West Allegheny and Central Valley, which, it's kind of funny. The two schools that have actually merged in the last 30 years, Woodland Hills and Central Valley, both went after a sort of North Carolina-esque light blue and black color scheme, and they were both dominating in their respective conferences ever since their mergers. But, Seneca Valley, or sorry, not Seneca Valley, I'm still thinking about Quad A. Central Valley is just a heck of a story, and they've produced some really great Division I prospects with Robert Foster and now Jordan Whitehead, who's consistently listed as one of the top players in the entire WPIAL. So I know they play in the last week of the season, so they'll probably run undefeated through the Parkway Conference and meet that, and maybe that'll be a preview of the championship game. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think they're hands down the top two teams. TJ is another one. Thomas Jefferson are always good. Chirk is, one of the best. Great guy, great coach. And yeah, I think TJ is a contender. I actually heard somebody. We asked on our Twitter account, the MSA Twitter account, about just different teams that people liked in AAA and stuff. And somebody tweeted us and said that on, I guess it was Saturday, that Mars beat Pine Richland in a scrimmage with both starters playing 27-7. So that could be a Mars team that you might want to look out for. We have them ranked, I think, 5th coming into the season, and so they're strong. When it comes down to it, if we see anybody but West A and Central Valley at Heinz Field, I think it'll be a little bit surprising. There's some good teams out there, but those are hands down the two best teams in AAA, and there's a lot of talent. You mentioned Whitehead. That kid's phenomenal. They had such a solid team last year. They have the Preston Johnson kid, who's an excellent linebacker. And then West A, my goodness. guys they brought back, Chase Dillon, Kester, the quarterback. I mean, it's amazing to me that they could win a championship last year, and I don't even know if anybody realized that they were still kind of young when they won last year. It reminded me a bit of 2 years ago when Allen Clifford won the championship. We were like, wow, these kids are all sophomores basically and juniors. And then here you go, this West A team, young last year. They lost a little bit, I think, from the defense and the line, but Alco is, I think, the best coach in the WPIL. He's the best defensive coach in the WPIL too, and that's where they make the championships. Is on that defense. They run an exotic blitz scheme that is so advanced from the high school level. It's just out of this world. If you've ever watched them on film, there's things they do, blitzing, stunt blitzes, things you just don't see at the high school level, and most kids don't pick up in college. They're doing it with sophomores on their team. You really have to be a smart kid to go to West A, and obviously you have to be a football player just in general. They have a lot of them. They're really blessed West A. I would be shocked if they did not win.
Then for me, I think I agree with both of you. West A and Central Valley, they're the two best teams, and what the Parkway's done over the years is just ridiculous. It's really a heck of a conference. Year after year, you just don't know what's going to happen in that conference. But Mars, I think, does have potential. They could, them and TJ. Then one game I look at that's going to be interesting is it's coming up this week is the Thomas Jefferson Ringgold game.
Yeah.
Going to be a really good one. I mean, Nico Law, he's a great athlete. He can run, he can throw. And then another team that I want to look out for is Gateway with Tom Nola. I mean, with a coach like that, who knows what they can do. They got to go up to Mars later in the year. That should be a fun game, I think. Those are my teams that I think could actually make some noise. But West Allegheny and Central Valley are 1-2 easily, I think.
That Ringgold TJ game in week 1, I know we definitely have guys there. I think we're actually doing video highlights for that one too that we'll have up. I was kind of actually pining the other day to get that game. A, it's slightly close to my house, and B, I think it's the best week 1 matchup. I think in the entire WPL, I think that's the best game in week 1. You mentioned Nico Law, that kid. I remember seeing him. He was a freshman, and I was like, wow, this kid is really good. And I think 2 years later, I saw him again, and I was like, I can't believe this kid is still playing high school football because he was so good 2 years ago. And then, he comes in this year, he's still in high school. It's like the kid's been around forever, and he is committed to Pitt, right?
I think so, yeah. I don't know.
He's committed to it. But, I mean, if he is, Pitt got a heck of a player. I mean, I don't know how they're going to use him. I don't know if you use him as a quarterback. I don't think you do, but he's such a great athlete, and ran for 1,000 yards, passed for 1,000 yards. Passed for 1,000 yards his sophomore year. He's a good player, and I think that Ringgold team is going to be really improved. I think kind of I don't want to say the sexy pick for a surprise team this year by a lot of people, but they're definitely a team that I've seen a lot of buzz around. I want to see if they can live up to that. I want to see if they are more than just Nico Law, because they have to be more than him, otherwise nothing's going to happen. The last couple of years, it's just been 100% Nico Law trying to get him. They're going to have to find a way to be a football team, especially if they want to be a team like TJ, because TJ is never about one guy for TJ. I mean, you can't name. I mean, they've put out Division I NFL players, TJ, but you can't look back and say, that kid when he was in high school, he was truly the star of the WPIAL. I mean, it's just such a team concept that they have there. They'll pound you, and if they want to beat a team like TJ, they have to realize that they have to play team football. Until they do that, it's going to be TJ's conference.
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely incredible what TJ's been able to do. Josh, you and I were kind of debating on Twitter last week. Who is the best program in AAA now? I mean, for so long, everyone had kind of thought that it was TJ, but with what West Allegheny's been able to do over recent years, there's certainly a case that West A is now should be considered the best program in AAA. But yeah, I agree with you, AJ, that the TJ Ringgold game this week probably is going to decide who wins that Big Nine conference, and it's pretty wide open after that because Elizabeth Forward lost some people, West Mifflin lost some people. And you got those teams that kind of hover around down at the bottom, those Uniontown teams with Uniontown and Laurel Highlands and Albert Gallatin. That they're always bottom dwellers, but those ones are actually some of the teams that are bringing back the most people in that conference, the most starters. So it could be an interesting bottom half. But I mean, TJ and Ringgold are clearly the class of the conference there. Just sort of catching up as we're going around the horn here. Josh, you had mentioned Mars beating Pine Richland. Josh Schulteis, the running back for Mars, I think he's had two 1,600-yard rushes so far when he was a sophomore and a junior, and he's a senior now. My AAA preview posted today, so I'm kind of up on all my AAA stuff right now. But Mars, Schulteis is the only skill position player that's returning from Mars, but I think they bring back 4 out of their 5 linemen. So that's the way Mars plays. They like to run the ball. They're not really much of a passing team, so Schulteis can carry them pretty far this year. I'm really intrigued by Gateway moving to the Greater Allegheny Conference. And I mean, we haven't even mentioned Franklin Regional, who has a very good team. I actually think, and this might be going out on a limb and somewhat be WPIAL blasphemy to say, but I actually think that top to bottom, the Greater Allegheny Conference might be the best conference in AAA this year. I mean, clearly the Parkway has the top 2 teams in AAA, but I think after West Allegheny and Central Valley, the Parkway is a lot weaker than it has been in the past. I couldn't tell you who the clear number 3 team in the Parkway is this year. I mean, it could be Montour. Hopewell brings some guys back after they had just a horrible year last year. Blackhawk's been up and down. Newcastle graduated almost all their starters. So it's hard to say, who the 3rd best team in the Parkway is, but then you look at the Greater Allegheny Conference and you've got the 3 at the top with Mars, Gateway, and Franklin Regional, and then you've got a bunch of other good teams there with Indiana bringing guys back from a playoff team last year. Locke just missed the playoffs last year. They bring a bunch of guys back. Hampton maybe snuck into the playoffs last year on a tiebreaker. They've got some guys coming back. Hollidaysburg always seems to find a way to make the playoffs over the last couple of years, and they've got a bunch of guys coming back. So it could be a really competitive year in the Greater Allegheny Conference.
Yeah, I agree with that. Franklin Regional is going to be a good team, I think. And one thing I want to touch on that's an enormous game is later in the year that's going to have an impact in Quad A and AAA is that West Allegheny Rolling Hills game. That's going to be really a game to watch for sure.
Yeah, I think that is a dream WPIL matchup right there. So, between classifications, that game is awesome. And it'll be cool too because it's not really meaningful in a way. I mean, either team it's not going to affect either team as far as I don't think playoffs or anything like that. And, unless West A beats Woodland Hills by like 40 points, that might affect things. I don't think it'll affect them too much where they get seeded. But yeah, I mean the Greater Allegheny is really good. Mentioned AJ Franklin Regional. Brett Zanato, that kid is just an absolute stud at linebacker. He tackles everything. I had them last year against Hampton, I think, Thursday night. We did 3-2, and he was amazing. He was all over the field, goes sideline to sideline. And I think he's going to Maryland, I want to say.
Yep, he's committed to there.
Yeah, and so he'll be a great fit there. And he's a guy that you can see going, in the future being a guy that plays heavily at a Division I school and really is a sound tackler. And that's one thing that really amazed me about Franklin Regional. They all are great tackling team. my question is offensively. Chern Singh, who was quarterback / wide receiver for the last couple of years for them, and a great defensive back too. He's gone. How they replace him, but we'll see what happens there. But Franklin always has been good up front. The trenches are always good, always sound. It's how they won WPIAL championship years ago. By being good up front, and I could see them being another team you put right there in the mix.
Yeah, so kind of circling back to the beginning here, I think we all agreed that West Allegheny and Central Valley are the top two teams. I'm actually going to go out on a limb and say Central Valley gets their revenge at Heinz Field and takes the championship this year back from West A, just to say something different from you guys. You guys sticking with your West Allegheny predictions?
Yes.
Yeah, West A, Central Valley in the championship, and Alco 7 for 7. I'm not going to go against.
I mean, to me, if any team had a chance to break that West Allegheny, Central Valley, the top two, I personally think it would probably be Mars. Possibly.
Yeah, I agree with that. Mars is a great team. I mean, when you can run the ball like they can definitely control the clock. And, I mean, the problem with, Central Valley and West Allegheny is they just play such good defense that, they're perfectly fine with slogging out winning games 16-6, 13-9, whatever it takes. And really the dark horse in AAA is Gateway that, they graduated pretty much all of their skill players last year. They had, I think, 3 or 4 receivers that were Division I recruits. All of them graduated. Their quarterback graduated. So you really don't know, what to expect from Gateway. They always have players in the pipeline. They've kind of been a perennial disappointment in Quad A, but maybe the step down in class helps them out a little bit. They could break in there, but with no returning starters, there's really nothing on paper to try and make a solid prediction for them.
I'll be right back. I gotta go get my charger real fast, okay?
Sure, yeah, we'll look at your ceiling for right now. I think that pretty much wraps up AAA. Let's check to see if no questions on Twitter yet. Okay. Questions on here? Nope, no questions yet. Okay. Moving on to AA. South Fayette returns Brett Brumbaugh, who was the Post-Gazette's Player of the Year last year, to my chagrin because I thought it should have been PJ Fulmore, but that's me being a North Catholic grad and being a homer.
The season. He missed half the season, didn't he?
I mean, South Fayette's absolutely stacked, and I mean the way they win games, just they don't give up any points. They score so much, and their defense plays so well that I gotta think it's them and Aliquippa as the top two teams. And before you guys get a word in, because I've been saying this on Twitter for a while, that the team I like to watch this year in AA is Highlands, moving down from AAA. They made the quarterfinals last year. They returned a bunch of starters from that team. A lot of their skill position players are back. And I know the Allegheny Conference has kind of been, the little brother in AA, and there aren't a lot of great teams in there that return. Katanning could be exciting, but they got beat by York last year in the first round. But I really think Highlands could make a run to the semifinals this year. But I don't see them being better than South Fayette or Aliquippa.
Yeah, I agree. I think Highlands is definitely a team to look out for. I think they are a semifinalist. I think they're potentially the third best team in AA, obviously behind South Fayette and Aliquippa. I want to see what happens with Aliquippa, and obviously everybody kind of pencils in Aliquippa to Heinz Field. They're replacing a lot too. I mean, they had 2 running backs graduate that ran for over 4,000 yards each in their career with Trayvon Henry and Terry Swanson. 2 Division I guys who are losing. The Q kid is really good. We saw him a little bit on the field, what he can do. He's a really good player. And they're always good up front. But I want to see. I don't necessarily say I want to see, but I'll be curious to see if the WPIL will be able to get some new blood at Heinz Field because it seems like Aliquippa and South Fayette are destined. And I think if there's maybe a lock for a championship game, it would be Aliquippa South Fayette. Um, you know, Central Valley, West Allegheny probably after that, but um, you know, South Fayette, they are they really didn't lose much. I mean, offensively, you bring back a starting quarterback who's going to be a Division One kid. Defensively, they're still solid. The Davidson kid, who's the defensive end, really good kid. He's going to go play in the Ivy League somewhere. Um, and it's tough for me to see them really falling off too hard from last year. I know they lost a little bit, but they got a lot back. And, uh, you know, I mentioned, if West Bay wasn't in the championship game, I would be shocked. If South Fayette didn't win the championship game this year, I would definitely be shocked because I just think that they're that deep, they're that solid, and they're a huge school too. I mean, they are right at the brink of being a AAA school. A lot of people thought they were going to have to go to AAA maybe with the realignment, and they narrowly made the cut. I think it was like by 4 kids. They made the cut to stay in AA for football, and they're a great team. I mean, they have a great shot at yet again of not only making it to Heinz Field, but making it to Hershey. We saw what they did at Hershey last year when they were kind of disrespected going into that game by a lot of people saying they were going to get crushed. They came out and they just showed that they could do it. I think South Fayette is clearly, by far, seemed to be really, I think, the only classification that has a team that is that far ahead of anybody else going into the season.
Yeah, I have to agree in AA that South Fayette and Aliquippa, they're the best 2 teams. They could be a lock for that championship game. And personally, watching that game last year at Heinz Field, it was one of the greatest games I've ever seen. There's just so many athletes on both sides of the ball between them and Aliquippa. It's just phenomenal. I mean, Aliquippa, they're just reload year after year. I mean, they got their quarterback back this year. They've got Kajon Pugh, who's going to be an emerging star. He already has a West Virginia offer from last year. And then they have Patrick Anderson, who every once in a while they would throw to at Heinz Field. He just catches the ball. He's just so tall. But the dark horse I want to touch on in AA is Seton LaSalle. I think they have a good quarterback. I think they have a good offense. They could make some noise, and they got to play South Fayette later in the year. But AA is there's just so many teams. I mean, Washington has a good run game. Quaker Valley, they got a good dual threat quarterback in Dane Jackson. And Catania and the Highlands, they're going to probably battle out for the Allegheny Conference, which I think is going to be a good battle too. But Catania, the question is with them, can they actually step up unlike last year? Because they look so good in the regular season, and they just laid that egg against York that first playoff game.
They got to get better on defense. That game.
Yeah.
I don't remember the final score, but I know it was like up in the 40s. I want to say, and that's something I think they have to work on. Defense. But Catania, the Toy kid at quarterback is good. The Bowers kid at tight end, and he's going to Pitt. He's one of the best tight ends in the state. And then Logan Robb, who's on their offensive line. Yeah, Bowers and Robb down at Keywood. We were talking about that, and I was blown away at how big these kids are. Not just tall, but massive. Bowers already looks like a college tight end up there. They're going to be really big, and they're going to be able to pound the ball. I think a good bit. And obviously Quaker Valley was a team that I liked, but now losing Dane Jackson for what looks like maybe a 5-week injury. And who knows with me how he'll be after he comes back. that could be something that could really impact their chances. But AJ, I like your call there. I mean, Seton LaSalle, I think, is a really good team. I thought they were good last year. Um, went out there and they just had sort of a lame duck performance against Cocoa Valley. Got blown out. They dropped 41 points on Seton last year. One thing Seton though needs to worry about is Seton's already talking about a state championship game. And I know that's their goal and everything, state championship, but you got to worry about beating South Fayette first. South Fayette has owned them. They have dominated Seton, and you have Corona at quarterback, who I think is a pretty special kid at quarterback, Division One. The Mellett kid in the backfield, and then Denzel McKinley-Lewis, the wide receiver. He is really special. I mean, the kid, I saw him play multiple sports last year, not just a receiver for the football team, but heck of a leadoff hitter for the baseball team. Has a ton of speed. I mean, I saw him just playing baseball last year. Seeing his speed, I was like, wow, this kid's going to bring something next year for football. And, there's a lot of talent on that Seton team. I think, obviously, it goes without saying, in that conference, I think right now, especially with Jackson being his injury up in the air, I think they're the team that has the best chance of beating South Fayette. I just don't think they're good enough to beat South Fayette. I think South Fayette is sort of a machine right now, and Joe Rossi is a phenomenal coach. So, I think they want to talk about state championship. They need to start talking about it maybe after they beat South Fayette, because state championship goes through the Lions and see what happens there. But of course, Seton and South Fayette, that's going to be a matchup to circle. It's one that both those teams are really good.
Yeah, two other teams that we haven't really talked about at all are New Brighton, who I actually think could be a bit of a surprise in the Midwestern Conference. I actually have them penciled in as my number 2 team there. Gabe Greco, the quarterback, I think he filled in last year. So I think he's stepping in full-time this year to be their quarterback, and he played well when the other kid was hurt. I forgot his name, sorry. Yeah, so I mean, I think New Brighton could be a bit of a surprise there. I think they're probably the second best team in the Midwest, and we haven't even really talked about Washington at all in the Interstate Conference with with Jeanette and Greensburg Central Catholic moving down to Single A. Washington's pretty clearly the best team in that conference, and I know Josh and I were joking around a little bit on Twitter about how the Interstate Conference now has 3 of the 5 longest losing streaks in the WPIAL with Burgettstown, Derry, and Brownsville there. Which that Burgettstown to Derry trip, I feel bad for those families. That's going to be an awful trip going from basically Greensburg all the way over to Burgettstown like Friday in rush hour traffic. That's going to be horrible. But, I mean, Washington's pretty clearly to me the best team in the Interstate Conference. Mount Pleasant lost a lot of players from their team last year that was pretty good. And once you get on a roll and get into the playoffs, anything can happen. I mean, I think Washington returns enough guys, they can make some bit of a run too.
Yeah, one of the every week when our schedules come out, the one place that I just am praying to not go is Derry. It's I don't understand how it's even in the WPIAL. It's so damn far away. But it's it's I mean that conference. You mentioned Wash High and they're good. After they lost McKenzie last year, they did take a step back a little bit, and the one kid there, Jordan West, is a heck of a player. Typically do throw out some pretty good linebackers too. I always enjoy watching their linebackers play. But they got to find a guy that can kind of pound the rock and be good up front like McKenzie did, and that line did 2 years ago when they made that great run to Heinz Field. But yeah, I mean, Double A is after South Fayette and probably Aliquippa, Double A is going to be a lot of fun. I mean, it's going to be a fun trip to the semifinals. I think after that, you potentially see maybe some not so great games in the semifinals, and then who knows what happens in the championship game then. I agree with you, AJ. That game was unbelievable to watch at Heinz Field. We were up in the press box and we were just blown away because not only was it such a great game, but then you had the snow coming, and that game was just everything you want in high school football. It really was. Aliquippa came close. That play there, near the end of the game, they almost knocked that ball out before it went over the line of scrimmage. And who knows what happens? We could be talking about defending state champion Aliquippa instead of defending state champion South Fayette. But yeah, Double A. I mean, there's a lot of depth after the top two, and we'll see how it shakes out. But again, we circle back. To what Ian said, Highlands, I think, was a heck of a team. The Timmons kid at quarterback, Elijah Jackson, I think, is the running back. And then his brother too is on that team. They are, they are really good. Man. They had a good run last year in AAA, and now they're in Double A. They're pretty much the same exact team. They're going to be tough. They're going to be tough out.
Yeah, I got Washington. I like Washington, Seton LaSalle the most after Aliquippa and South Fayette, I think. Washington's got that. With Shy McKenzie getting hurt last year, they found out they actually have two decent running backs in Malik Wells and Jordan West, and they're quality backs, I think. And they're in that conference, they're the overwhelming favorite, I think. And then St. LaSalle, Ty Perrone passed for over 2,300 yards last season, but the big question is, can they knock off South Fayette, which is, they're just a machine year after year.
Two teams that we didn't mention are teams that are moving up in Double A. That's Stowe Rocks and Apollo Ridge. And I think Apollo Ridge has the best athlete in WPIL, Trey Tipton. Maybe not the best football player, but the best athlete is Trey Tipton in WPIL. Anytime I can get an Apollo Ridge game, whether it's basketball or football, I'm ecstatic because he alone is worth the price. The kid can jump out of the gym. We saw him on the football field last year to make one big play after another. Both of those teams hit hard in a way by graduation, and it's going to be tough for them moving up. Still Rocks, obviously losing Lenny Williams, Reggie Blair, and company, but I want to see what they do. I don't think they're championship caliber teams. I don't think they're semifinal caliber teams, but they're teams I think that are going to give you good Friday nights. They're going to be good competitive football teams because that's just their makeup. And it doesn't matter they move up. And Apollo Ridge and what John Skiba has done out there, they were just kind of a joke perennially. All of a sudden now they have a lot of talent, and I think the breakout player of the year, I think, could be at Apollo Ridge too. It's not Trey Tipton, it's Dwayne Brown, who was a freshman last year. And I saw him, and we looked, I did their game against Wilkinsburg. He was all over the place Saturday afternoon. And I'm like, who is this kid? Because he was not even on their original roster. We had to write him in. Turns out he was a freshman last year. And now I think he's a kid that's really going to take the next step. I think you're going to see him in the backfield, and then they're going to work him back there as well, getting those two kind of in groove set. But Skiba is a great coach, great offensive line mind, and I think Apollo Ridge is going to be, if anything, a fun team to watch because of that athletic ability they have.
Yeah, I actually think Apollo Ridge is probably good enough to sneak into the playoffs, probably as the number 3 or 4 team in the Allegheny Conference. I'd be remiss if we didn't mention Shadyside Academy, who's a perennial contender up there in the Allegheny Conference. But I think Apollo Ridge, probably Apollo Ridge and Freeport are probably going to compete for that last spot. And actually, since I grew up north of the city and have a lot of friends in, kind of the Highlands, Valley, Freeport area, I love the fact that Highlands is playing Valley again, and you get that great rivalry where they compete for the bridge there. And any rivalry where a bridge gets named based on the result of a football game is a fantastic rivalry. So I'm really glad to see Highlands and Valley playing each other again. And I think, Josh, you mentioned Stowe Rocks. I think they just lost too much. And the Century Conference is actually a really good conference. South Park made the playoffs last year, and they return a lot of people. Steel Valley got hit by a couple injuries last year that kind of knocked them off their horse. But I think they could be a really good team again this year. And Quaker Valley's kind of up in the air. I kind of had them penciled in at number 3, possibly number 2. But with Jackson's injury, if he's out 4, 5, 6 weeks, that kind of kind of changes the story in the Century Conference and opens the door for South Park and South Fayette to compete there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly still us. I don't think it's a team that, you look at. They might not even be a playoff team, but I think that they're going to make that conference, which is, the best conference in AA, even deeper. And then you talk about Valley, too. I'm curious to see how Muzzy Grossman does at Valley, taking that program over. To me, Valley, and I saw them last year against Summit Academy, who had a pretty good year last year. They were a team with a ton of ability, but I thought that they were at times incredibly undisciplined. I mean, I had them on a Saturday afternoon. I think they had like 6 or 7 personal fouls. They had like 170 penalty yards. I mean, it was a mess. And it seemed to me like a team that has talent. I mean, I've had them the last couple of years. They have talent. They've had great skill players, but they kind of needed a good coaching hand. And obviously, Muzzy had a lot of success at GCC, where maybe he didn't have to worry too much about his kids. Pretty level-minded GCC team that he had back when they made Heinz Field and won a championship. So I think he can come into Valley, and I think he can kind of maybe instill a little bit more discipline in that program to the point where they could be a team that you can see maybe getting back to the playoffs and not necessarily being a contender in AA, but being a team that definitely will raise some eyebrows in a way because they've always had that skill out
there. I want to. The one team that Ian mentioned that I actually forgot about was Shadyside Academy. I think they actually returned most of their starters. I didn't have them in my rankings on my blog, but they're definitely a team to watch out for that could make some noise for sure because they returned the majority of their starters. And then I'm interested to see what Apollo Ridge does with Trey Tipton. He's a heck of an athlete. I mean, I think they could make the playoffs, but AA is just year after year. It's just typically so deep because there's so many teams.
Yeah, Shadyside, they have the Berry kid, Lewis Berry, who receiver. They have Pat Lachlan, who's a heck of a lineman too. So a lot of talent on that Shadyside team, and I agree. Any team that is consistently good. Maybe not consistent champion, but consistently good like Shadyside, they can bring back a lot of starters, and they're a team that you have to look at automatically as one team to talk about because, obviously there's a good base there, and if you bring back talent, it's going to be nothing but good things.
Yeah, I actually saw Trey Tipton play when he was a sophomore at Apollo Ridge. My cousin goes to Springdale, and I went to watch their game against Apollo Ridge, and I was like, he was playing wide receiver, and they were throwing him the ball every play. I was like, who is this kid? He's incredible. So, yeah, Tipton's a heck of an athlete. He's so much fun to watch. And, Shadyside Academy, it's kind of funny that, we remember Katanning is, winning their first championship in over 30 or over 40 years last year and having their first undefeated season. But Shadyside Academy really got hosed in that game. I remember listening to it, and Katanning was up by 7, and Shadyside scored a touchdown right at the end, and they got called for a personal foul penalty, I think for spiking the ball or something like that, or throwing the ball into the stands, and they had to kick an extra point from 15 yards back, and they missed it and wound up losing by 1. So it's kind of funny, looking back at last year how everyone remembers that shootout between Katanning and York, but I mean, it could have been a much different story if that had been Shadyside Academy in that game. So kind of just to wrap up AA here, because my kids will be home soon and they'll be running around screaming because they're 3-1. So I want to try and get a move on this. But just to kind of wrap up, yeah, I agree. I think actually one of the most incredible streaks in the entire WPIAL is Aliquippa's streak of, I think, 38 conference games that they've won in a row. They haven't lost a conference game since 2009. And since 2009, the only games that Aliquippa has lost has been to South Fayette at Heinz Field. So that's a pretty crazy streak, and they've made 6 consecutive championship games. So I find it really hard to bet against them. I'm gonna go with South Fayette to repeat though. South Fayette over Aliquippa again. which, it's kind of the same story that we've seen 2 out of the last 4 years with a Brumbaugh, emerging victorious over Aliquippa at Heinz Field. But I mean, South Fayette's just so loaded, I can't pick against them. But I mean, I think Highlands and Seton LaSalle are certainly both semifinal capable, but I don't think either of them are good enough to upset the top two.
I think Aliquippa, I'm going out on a limb here. I think Aliquippa will beat South Fayette in the championship game. And then one team I want to give a mention to is Beaver Falls. Who knows what they'll do? I mean, they could be a good team, possibly, but I don't think it would be as good as Aliquippa, though.
I mean, Beaver Falls, how close were they to beating Aliquippa last year?
Yeah.
Talk about teams getting hosed. I mean, nobody got hosed more than Beaver Falls in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Aliquippa when they had that kind of phantom play at the end of that game, and who knows what happens if Beaver Falls wins that game. So yeah, I mean, I saw Beaver Falls early in the year last year. They played in Mohawk. I was really impressed by them. And then, they were sort of up and down after that, and then they beat, or they almost beat Aliquippa. I'm like, geez, where was this team at the rest of the year? I think they just get up for that game so much, and there's so much adrenaline flowing, and, I think they kind of, I don't want to say they get in the heads of Aliquippa, but they're the one team, I think, that can play psychologically with Aliquippa. They're not intimidated by them at all, and, they played a heck of a game against them last year. It wouldn't surprise me if they were a good team yet again this year. You just never quite know. With that people.
Yeah. So moving on to Class A, and my alma mater, the North Catholic Trojans, are the defending state champions. So I have to lead with that, obviously.
We've been waiting for an hour and a half to say
that. Hey, I couldn't resist. They were so bad when I was in high school, and I was in the band, and I had to sit through so many dreary, rainy, bad football games. Like, I remember my senior year, we're playing Deer Lakes in our homecoming game, and we hadn't won a game all year. And it's 14-0 Deer Lakes with 2 minutes left in the half, and I'm kind of sitting there with my buddies, and we're like, well, we'll go into halftime down 14-0. Maybe we can come back and make something of it, for our homecoming game. Well, 2 blocked punts and an interception return for a touchdown later. It's 35-0 going into the half, and that was kind of what I went through in high school. That just encapsulated it all. But I mean, Single A, of all the conferences, saw the most movement with realignment, and everyone got shuffled around. With Stowe Rocks leaving in the Big 7, you kind of just have Neshannock there. And Rochester had a down year last year, but I kind of like them to rebound. You got Riverside moving into the Big 7 from Double A, and they were not very good in Double A, but they've got a lot of starters returning to that team. The Black Hills Conference and the Eastern Conference, they kind of split them up and then matched them together. But in the new Black Hills, you've got Cardinal World North Catholic now that I'll call it, since it's up in Cranberry. It was North Catholic when it was on Troy Hill, but it's Cardinal World now that it's up in Cranberry. But they returned so many players from that team last year. PJ Fulmore, Adam Charlo, Jerome Turner, the other running back. Watch out for Mario Latronica. He was a freshman last year, a little speedy kid that got some big plays for him. And Avonworth was a heck of a team. I mean, Avonworth and North Catholic played 2 fantastic games last year. And Avonworth was an excellent team that was definitely probably the 5th best team in Class A last year, but they didn't get a lot of respect just because they had a couple losses in the regular season. But they were a fantastic team, and you have Brentwood in the Black Hills now that returns a quarterback that threw for I think over 1,500, maybe over 1,600 yards last year. And then in the Eastern Conference, you've got sort of the 3-headed monster of Clairton, Greensburg Central Catholic, and Gannett. Which, I mean, Clairton is absolutely stacked again this year.
I mean, the Eastern Conference is it's ridiculous how good it is. I mean, it's so good. I mean, you got Clairton, you got Greensburg Central Catholic, you got Jeanette, and then you got Monessen. Who knows what they're going to do? I mean, that conference is just, I think Clarendon is the best team in that conference, but North Catholic is, for now, I think the best team. They returned 2 key guys from injuries from last year with PJ Fulmore. He's a heck of an athlete. I mean, he just carried that team in the playoffs last year. It was phenomenal. And then Avonworth, I think, could have also a good year down at single A because North Catholic and Avonworth, they did play 2 fantastic games last year. And then one other team, Neshannock with Eli Owens, I think could actually make some noise maybe. And then Jeanette. Jeanette has a quarterback in Julian Bass. He's pretty good. And I think the best conference is the Eastern Conference. I mean, it just could be completely up in the air. I mean, I think Clarendon's the best team, but after that, you got Monessen, Greensburg Central Catholic, and you got, who did I mention? Monessen, yeah. This just so good. But Monessen, they got to replace some key guys.
Yeah, this is, I guess, the point where I can plug myself, because I'll actually have, I'll be calling Monessen at Greensburg Central Friday night. And it's funny, I commented a few weeks ago just how good single A is in general, especially with GCC and Monessen down. And so, I'll get to see, or excuse me, GCC and Jeanette down. So now I'll get to see Monessen and Greensburg Central, and looking forward to that on Friday. I think it's a great way to start the season, too. Pretty strong team. GCC, they had to replace a little from last year. They lost their quarterback. The name is escaping me right now. I just wrote it down. Not Kessler. Whatever his name is. He's at St. Francis now, and Tyler Bollickid was their leading running back and leading receiver, leading rusher and leading receiver. And another kid who they lost who was their second leading rusher and second leading receiver as well. So they lost a good bit of talent, GCC, but they brought back a decent bit too because the kid that was their quarterback last year, he was injured early on, and this kid came in, the new kid, Tom Ellis. He came in and took over and was terrific for them, and he threw for nearly 900 yards, 6 touchdowns, and really was able to do some good things. And now they moved down, and GCC is going to be a heck of a team, I think. That Eastern Conference in general is just unbelievable. I keep wanting to put Clarendon in the Black Hills, but I know that they are not. It seems like Clarendon should be in the Black Hills. Clarendon now Eastern Conference. And now Clarendon, I mean, for years I've been like, oh, man, how good would Clarendon now be? How good would Clarendon Jeanette be? Now we're going to get a chance to see it. And another kid for Jeanette, on top of what you said, AJ, Zach Altieri, defensive back, season time receiver. Jeanette typically pretty good up front, too. And Jeanette's always been a Class A team. I mean, they've always been a Class A team playing up to Double A. Now they're going to move back down. And, Jeanette last year got off to a great start. They're 4-0 to start the year. They look like the same old Jeanette maybe that we've been used to seeing. And then it seemed like, and I talked to Zach Altieri when we were at Canada a few weeks ago, and he said that there was just some bad attitude and some bad locker room chemistry for last year's team, and it kind of all hit about that midway point, and they ended up just tanking the rest of their season. They went 0-5 to end the year, and I asked him kind of, is that out of the system? And he was like, yeah, he was adamant that has all been cleared out. There are a new team coming in. They're ready to win. And I think they have a great chance of being a solid team, not just in the conference, but a solid playoff team too that you could see potentially make a run because of their talent. But really, again, Clarendon I think is the team to beat. Lamont Wade and running back, and Harrison Dreyer, and that team that they have is so good. Aaron Matthews, who they're going to move to receiver. I mean, you're talking about 3 kids right there who still fairly inexperienced. I mean, most of them just have 1 year really contributing to the team because of how good the team was 2 years ago and all the talent that they have. Really only 1 year of experience now back again for another year, and I think they're only going to get better. That Clareton team, they are going to be, I think, the biggest challenge to North Catholic to win.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Clareton is loaded, and the one team we haven't mentioned there is Springdale, which, I mean, they were kind of perennial contenders, and then they graduated a ton of people 2 years ago, and they really just struggled to find the end zone last year. Their defense wasn't all that bad; they just couldn't score points last year. And when I was kind of going through getting my previews together for this year, I kind of remembered that Springdale and Monessen had met in the playoffs a few times, and I looked back. Springdale has actually knocked Monessen out of the playoffs 6 of the last 11 years, which is kind of incredible for Class A. So I mean that those two in a conference together. Monessen had a heck of a team last year. They knocked off Clareton. They gave Neshannock a run for their money in the quarterfinals. And and I certainly think Monessen probably is the 4th best team, but it would not surprise me at all if Springdale snuck into the playoffs in that conference, just because how much Springdale has had Monessen's number, in the past, and that's kind of one of the budding rivalries that I'm excited to see in this Eastern Conference. Aside from, I mean, Clareton and Springdale have met a bunch of times in the playoffs too. Springdale, I think, actually knocked Clareton out. Aside from Clareton's loss to Stowe Rocks last year, I think Springdale had been the last team that had beaten Clareton in the playoffs. So now they're all in a conference together. That Eastern Conference is absolutely loaded. And given how Class A has gone recently, you can probably bet that the 3rd place team from that conference is probably going to draw one of the Tri-County South teams in the first round. But you kind of think about who's going to be in the bracket with them, and if Jeanette finishes 3rd in that conference and gets like the number 9 seed, that would be a 2nd round game between Jeanette and either North Catholic or Clareton, whoever gets the number 1 seed. I mean, that would be a quarterfinal game that would be worthy of Heinz Field right there. And I agree. I think that Clareton is definitely the biggest threat to North Catholic, but I mean, Greensburg Central Catholic traditionally just plays such good defense. They have a slew of linebackers once again that are just a heck of a group of football players, and it always surprises me how consistently good GCC has been able to be in what was a very good interstate conference in AA, and now moving down to Class A, I think they'll be even better. So, and I think GCC actually made a run to the championship game in AA out of the number 15 seed a couple of years ago. So they're certainly a team to watch. That don't count them out whenever playoff time rolls around. But I think I agree with you, AJ. Neshannock will be good again. I think they're certainly the best team in the Big 7 up there. And I think I'm going to be a homer and pick North Catholic over Clareton for the championship.
Monessen, I think they do lose Clintel Gillespie, who was a great athlete, but they return quarterback Noah Rulo, who passed for 20 touchdowns last season. So they should have a decent team to make the playoffs probably. But Greensburg Central Catholic is a team you got to always watch for. They're just so consistently good. It's amazing. Like, Tommy Palace is a good quarterback. Then their defense is, it's always consistently good. But I agree. I think Clareton, is still a young team. I think North Catholic and Clareton will be at Heinz Field. North Catholic is just so good. That game just could go either way. I mean, Clareton just has so many athletes. It's just ridiculous. North Catholic, they got so many athletes on offense. I mean, Fulmar, and then Darlow, and then Turner. I mean, they just got so many weapons, too. It should be a heck of a game if they meet at Heinz Field.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ian. Mario Latonica. Obviously I saw them a lot last year. I did the WPIAL championship game, I did the state championship game. He was a kid that always seemed to just be in on the play, particularly defensively, defensive back. I kind of want to see what happens with them now with Charlo back. I want to see how they incorporate him into their offense. DJ Fulton had to play out of position so much last year, and obviously that worked for them. They kind of had to, in a way, redo their offense to suit him, and they became such a ground-based team. I want to see now maybe if they can throw a little bit. If they can, maybe work DJ into the passing game a little bit. I think that's something that I think it's what Duquesne is going to have to do more of, is being a receiver. But pound for pound, he might be the toughest kid I've seen in WPIL in the last couple of years. I interviewed him. You can actually see on our MSA YouTube page. I interviewed him after the state championship game. And this kid, he had bruises all up and down his arm. There was blood all over his jersey. He was nicked, he was cut, and, he looked like he was still ready to play. He's had to deal with some injury issues in the past. And the thing that worries me is if he goes down with another injury, can they survive in what I think is now a better Class A than it has been in the past? I mean, Clareton now being better, and even in their conference. I mean, Avonworth almost caught him last year. Avonworth, good team, and I want to say that good. So I'm going to pick Heinz Field right now. I'm going to be with you guys. I want to say North Catholic. Clareton make it. To play devil's advocate and piss me off, I'll say Clareton. But either way, it wouldn't surprise me. North is a great team. They were a great team last year. Brought a lot back. But Clareton is Clareton, and I'll tell you this: we talked about Tommy Nola going to Gateway, but Wayne Wade did a lot of coaching on that team, a lot more than a lot of people realize. Tom Nola got a lot of credit for being the head coach. That defense that they had that was so great that was pretty much all Wayne Wade's defense. And I think that is going to be a big factor in this coming season, how their defense plays. That's where they got into trouble last year. That Monessen game, the first game they lost, to break the streak because of their defense. They were able to score points, but the defense just could not handle it. They kept giving up big plays to Monessen, and they weren't able to fully get back into that football game. So, Clareton, if they can get the defense working again, which I think they will, because Clareton is always, in the mix as far as the best defensive teams in WPIL. If they can get that working, then look out. I think they have potentially a chance to win another state championship. And I'll tell you what, if that were the case, 1 year off in a run of WPIL titles and state titles seem all that bad. And a lot of people made a deal about it's Clareton taking a step back, but they got the right guy for the job. I thought years ago that Tom Nola was going to step down. He didn't, and I thought Wayne Wade would have been a great replacement 3 years ago. So it's good to see him finally get a job. He's a good guy. I thought he had an opportunity to go elsewhere and get a job, but he passed up. Eastport really wanted him for a while, and ended up with Coach Smith coming back. He ended up not taking that job. So he's in a great spot to be successful with Clareton now. And again, look back at Clareton. I think that's the championship game. History has it. It'll probably be a game that I end up broadcasting, because that seems to always draw the 9 a.m. shift in Heinz Field for MSA, calling the early game, which this year, unfortunately, will be on a weekday. It's a Friday afternoon, and it's not going to be Black Friday either. So, unfortunately, a lot of people are not going to be able to watch some of those early games. It's kind of a bummer, but we'll have one to be done with.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to me that, we talk about Clareton having a down year last year, and, they only lost one conference game, and they made the semifinals, which was actually a really close game against Stowe Rocks. I mean, Clareton's won 6 of the last 8 Class A championships, and the other 2 years they lost in the semifinals. So, for that, I think there's a lot of schools that would take a run to the semifinals and only one loss during the regular season, but it speaks to just how good Clareton has been and how good that program has been down there. So I think that about wraps it up. So thanks, guys, for participating.
And then one more thing. Who do you think in the TCS conference, if there's one team that's likely to win a playoff game, who is it?
Oh, man. You know what? I love the story of Avella last year just because of, I mean, 3 years ago they had cheerleaders and kids in the band on the football team just so they could field a team, and then they made the playoffs last year. But I don't think they're nearly good enough. I think if there's any team, it's probably California. Moving over from the Black Hills Conference, California lost a lot of people, but they also they also have that experience of playing in the Black Hills Conference where they actually almost made the playoffs last year. I think they were in a casket match with Brentwood at the end of the year. Carmichael's actually came really close last year. I think they only lost by a point to Fort Cherry. So, I think Beth Center was definitely seated where they should have been, even though they were undefeated in the conference champions. But I'll go with California as the one team from the TCS that could win a playoff game.
Kind of opt out of it. I mean, maybe Best Center because they're just always the best team. I don't know. There's one conference that I know very little about in the entire WPIAL. It would be the BTS conference because it's been so irrelevant so long now. It's done very much. Maybe Best Center, I agree. Maybe California moved over based on experience, but boy, that conference. I mean, now every 2 years we keep hoping that realignment sort of shuffles it up so that we can get, a fourth good conference, and it's just not happening. That conference just kind of stays down. Hey, it is what it is. It's sort of the black eye, I guess, on single A, but hey, who knows? Maybe they surprise me. You saw what Yawk did last year. I mean, Yawk kind of surprised everybody. Won a playoff game, Double A. Who knows? Maybe this year a team from the TCS win. But the problem that they're always going to have is until they win a playoff game, they're not going to get good seeds. Best Center goes undefeated, and they don't get a good seed because they're not going to be valued highly over a one-loss Eastern Conference or a one-loss Black Hills Conference. Or honestly, even a two-loss Eastern Conference this year, I think should be seated higher than a team that goes undefeated in the TCS just because of the way the conferences are. And until they prove otherwise, we see this all the time, the WPIL and the steering committees, until a conference proves that they can win in the postseason and you compete against other WPIL teams, they just don't get favored very highly when it comes to seeding time. And I think that's, no matter how good any team is from the TCS, I think that's going to be the case this year, that they're not going to get a very good seed.
Yeah, I agree. Best Center or Carmichael's would probably be one of those two teams. But Avella, I love their story. I mean, I remember seeing that story where they actually had to dress a cheerleader up in a uniform to actually have enough players in there to have a football team, which is it's just a remarkable story. I mean, it's just awesome.
It's amazing too because Avella. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever been to Avella, but first of all, it's in the middle of nowhere, and there's just nothing around it. It's all farms, and it's mainly just like abandoned farms. And it's really incredible to go out there. And their numbers, you look at their numbers like 10 years ago or 5 years ago, compared to what they are now, it's just like such a significant decrease. I don't know if any school district has been hit by just a population decrease in the last 10, 15 years like Avella has. They've just fallen off the map almost in a way. And, I know that they've worked on mergers, trying to get them in other school districts. I want to say like South Fayette, maybe they're trying to get in. I forget who exactly they're trying to get in, but they're trying to get in with other school districts to get a merger done. Kind of like we've seen Clareton too. Clareton, I don't think it's too much of a secret. They've tried to merge school districts many times, and it does not seem to work year after year when they try to merge. But yeah, their story is really incredible. They were just getting pummeled week after week for like 9 kids that knew anything about football. And now there they are last year winning games. Like it was. I think their story is one of the best I've seen in 5 years. Just kind of the turnaround they have there.
Yeah, actually, one final note before we go too. Last year, Avella's story, they hadn't made the playoffs since 1976. If you're looking for a similar team this year, Southmoreland in AA, they haven't made the playoffs since 1979. But with how weak the interstate conference is, they returned some players, and they could be a team to watch. So, well, thanks a lot for participating, guys. I really appreciate it, and hopefully we can get together, keep doing this, maybe make it a weekly thing. Thanks to anyone that tuned in, watched us, and this will be up on YouTube, so I'll tweet the link out for that too. You guys want to give a plug to your Twitter accounts and blogs one more time before we roll?
Yeah, again, my name is Josh Roundtree. My Twitter handle is JROWN32. I also work for MSA Sports. It's msasports.net, and you can follow our Twitter at MSA Sports, which I run. So follow theirs and follow me. So make sure you follow that, and we're getting set to go too. I mean, just final, I guess, plug today. I think I counted up. We have 42 broadcasts set for Friday night, so we will be fully immersed in WPIAL football. And then, of course, we're the exclusive playoff providers too. We're the only company that's allowed to broadcast any playoff WPIAL games in sports. So I make sure that.
And then I'm Andrew Schaefer, and I run AJWPIAL on Twitter, and I'm a contributor for D7 on westernpafootball.net, and then I got my own website, which, if anybody's watching, I would really appreciate it if you checked it out, WPIALfootballzone.wordpress.com, and go Gators.
Dival or Gateway?
Gateway.
Oh. I thought we might have had a Dival Catholic.
That's funny. I went to Allegheny College, and we were the Gators too. So when you said "Go Gators," I was like, "Did he go to Allegheny too?" But we always said "Go Gators." But I'm Ian. I run the Steelers and That on Twitter. My blog is thesteelersandthat.blogspot.com. AJ definitely made the good choice of going with WordPress, but I started blogging so long ago that WordPress wasn't that good back then, and I've kind of just stuck with Blogspot. But hey, it is what it is. On Friday nights, if you guys are watching, make sure you follow the hashtags WPIAL and MSA Scores on Twitter, just to kind of keep up with the live scores as they happen. Because I know the people with the broadcast tweet them out. Also, the hashtag Skylights get some scores too. So if you're trying to follow along, Twitter is a great tool for following along with WPIAL football on Friday nights. Definitely keep an eye on those 3 hashtags. WPIAL, MSA Scores, and Skylights are the 3 main ones to keep an eye on. And then the MSA website is definitely the best one. Josh, I'm just going to shamelessly plug your company here. It's definitely the best one for scores at the end of the night too. They get them up faster than anyone. They'll probably have them up within a half hour of all the games being done, if not sooner. Or you could wait around for 2 hours for the Post-Gazette to get them up. But MSA site's definitely a lot faster. So definitely check them out. Thanks a lot, guys, for participating.
And then I want to add one last thing about. I just want to say that I'm going to be, instead of tweeting scores, I'm actually going to be going to games this year and actually tweeting live scores, because I'm going to be working for that football website. So I won't be tweeting as much scores this year, but I'll be tweeting the ones I go to.
Cool. Awesome. So, all right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks to those who tuned in, and hopefully we can get together again next week.
All right. Thanks.